Cumberland traffic, Copeland 4041 uniform, departing 11 for island 10.
Welcome to Soaring the Sky, a glider pilots podcast. My name is Chuck. I will be your host, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and flying with the Cumberland Soaring Group. This is episode 46. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Soaring Incorporated, the nation's largest provider of professional glider training. Since 1969, they provided training from initial private through CFI glider and entry level through advanced aerobatics. Open year-round, 7 days a week. More information is available at azsoaring.com. On today's episode of the podcast, we talk with a student pilot who fell in love with aviation at a very young age after his first commercial flight while on vacation with his parents. Later, at the age of 12, he took his first private power lesson with the Civil Air Patrol, and soon after took his first glider ride in a Schweitzer 233. Hear what happened after Connor jumped in the cockpit, and hear the rest of his story. And later on the podcast, we will recap 2019, Soaring the Sky's first year, all of that right now here on Soaring the Sky. Connor, welcome to the podcast. I believe you're in Silver Spring, Maryland, correct?
That is correct.
Great to have you today. Where did everything get started for you in your aviation journey?
So my aviation journey started when I was 10 years old. And my parents told me one day that we were taking a flight down to Florida. And, 10-year-old me was like, oh, cool, we get to, fly on a plane. That's cool. And after we took, I had this immense feeling of excitement. And, as soon as we landed, I started watching videos of planes. My parents were a little confused because I never had any interest in it before that flight. So I feel that flight just really sparked something inside of me. I got hooked on flying, and then a couple months later, I had my parents buy me Microsoft Flight Simulator X, and that's when I really got hooked, and I really wanted to start flight lessons.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, the Flight Simulator, you can definitely discover a lot. It can be very overwhelming, but really cool. All different kinds of airplanes you can fly in.
So many choices.
Like a lot of people, you have your first flight and you automatically fall in love with it. So where do you go from there?
So from there, we found out about the Civil Air Patrol, actually, while visiting the nearby College Park Aviation Museum. And I was still a little too young to join then. The minimum age requirement was 12 years old. So actually, a week before I turned 12, we went to visit the local squadron because you have to attend 3 meetings before you can fully join. So pretty much right after I turned 12, I joined, and within the first 2 weeks in the program, I took my first powered orientation flight.
So how did you feel about that?
I loved it even more than flying on a jetliner, because there's so much more to see. And to actually, get control of the aircraft is a completely new feeling from flying in the back. It was really exciting.
So did you go to gliders after that? What happened?
So they only offer glider flights at one airport in Maryland, at least for Civil Air Patrol. So we had to wait until it was warmer out. But as soon as that announcement came out that they were offering glider flights for the first time that year, I made sure I was on the first day to go because I had a little bit of experience with gliders in the simulator, and they seemed to be a completely different beast from normal flying. And when I got to the airport, I was surprised at how not uptight everything was. They're just you walk around the flight line with the glider, you stand on the runway to get into it, and it was all just a really cool experience for me.
What did you fly that first time?
The first time I flew in a Schweitzer 233.
Very cool. That was my first glider flight was in a 233.
Very popular, I see.
Yeah, it's a very good trainer. It's kind of big and people say it's like flying around a truck, but it does the job.
We said it was like a school bus.
Yeah, school bus. There you go. It does the job, and it's very reliable, and it's recovers from a stall very easily, and yeah, they're great trainers. So how many flights did you have? What did you do after that?
So after that, I kept going back every time they offered them, and I got a total of 4 flights in before the flight instructor moved to West Virginia, and we didn't have glider operations for a couple years. So in that time frame, I started, looking for another way that I could try and fly a glider, and one of them was the flight academy in Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. And I couldn't go my first year because I had another conflict. So I ended up having to wait until I was 15 and applied, and I got in that year.
Where were you flying over there, the Civil Air Patrol?
So at the flight academy, I actually was training in a TG-10B, which is the Air Force's version of the L-23 Superplanet.
Okay, I'm familiar with that one.
So it's not as big and clunky as the Schweitzer. It has a better glide ratio. It's a
Yeah, that's
little,
always helpful.
yeah, it's a little more not aerobatic, but it's you can do a little more aggressive stuff in that.
The response is better,
Yep,
probably a little faster, just things happen a little quicker.
so much quicker.
Yeah. So how did your training go? What did you find most difficult, I guess, and what did you find maybe not as difficult?
One thing that helped out a lot in difference from sim to real world is how much you can feel while you're flying. So I actually found it quite a bit easier to handle the glider in real life because if you're slowing down, you can feel that. If you're not flying straight, you can feel it. You get all this real time. And actually, one of the most difficult parts I found was landing. I had done some powered flight training before I did glider, and I was used to flaring as I came into land. And my flight instructor for the first year had to drill just leveling off into me instead of pulling back and raising the nose.
Yeah, that's definitely the difference. It's kind of hard to get used to if you've flown both of them.
Yep.
It's kind of weird, but now I love landing the glider. But
Oh, now I find when I fly powered, I forget to flare enough, and so sometimes I have a little rougher landings than I probably should.
yeah, right. So how was your takeoff and flying in formation with the tow plane? How did that go?
It took me a little while to get used to it, but by the end of the week, I actually got pretty good at it. And in my first year, we started learning how to box the wake.
Oh yeah, that's fun, huh?
It was a little intimidating, but as I got used to it, it actually became pretty fun.
It is. It's one of the I found it as one of the tougher things to learn, boxing the weight. I mean, I definitely had to do lots of practicing on that, and even when I do it
Yep.
now, it's sometimes it can be. It's like, oh, I got to brush up on that a little bit. I've forgotten how to do this.
So I actually have a story for my second year at the academy. On my pre-solo, they asked me to box the wake, and so I called the tow plane. I said, I'm boxing the wake, and to the bottom left, the top left, and the top right just fine. And then as I'm going to the bottom right, a gust of wind hits me from the left side, and I fall really low, and a bunch of slack comes in the tow rope, and it was really scary, not only because of how low I got on the tow, but also because I had a check pilot in the back and was very worried about how that would turn out. But luckily, I managed to straighten everything back out, and the check ride continued. But it was very nerve-wracking.
I can imagine, especially with someone sitting in the back seat, watching it every move.
Yeah.
But you brought it out and got it back where it needed to be, and
hmm a couple more seconds and I would have had to pull the release, but luckily everything started straightening back out.
yeah, and we've talked about that before on the podcast, how important it is for the tow pilot and the glide pilot to, work with each other and trust each other, because it's super important when you're taking off and when you're flying in formation. It's kind of like each
Yep.
of you are definitely depending on the other one to keep each other safe.
Most
So they
certainly.
definitely want to make sure you know what you're doing before they let you get on that.
Yep.
Well, that's another thing. When people fly powered, they're not usually flying in formation, especially when they're learning. And another useful tool and skill is to be able to fly in formation. and when
Mhm.
flying gliders. So many things you can learn about flying in gliders that you otherwise really wouldn't do in a powered plane. Just to,
Yeah.
more reason to start out with gliders.
Mhm. It's a much better way to learn the fundamentals of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you're saying, how you felt, every move of the glider.
Mhm.
You don't have that engine, so you don't have that distraction, and you can hear it, you can feel it. It's just a whole another way of flying.
Yep.
What are you working towards now? So let me back up a little bit. Your solo, how did that go? You said you
Yes,
soloed
I soloed this
in
past
the
summer.
planning.
Yes. And I think it was my best flight that I did in my entire soaring. I don't remember much of it just because, there was a lot of adrenaline, and having watched the videos from it a couple times, those have really cemented themselves in my mind. But I maintained a really good tow according to the people who were watching, and I had a really nice, gentle land, and I managed to keep wings level until after I stopped, which is something I had never been able to do. May have been something with the different weight and balance since I didn't have an instructor in the back.
Oh yeah, you definitely feel it, and I'm sure that you
Hmm.
felt yourself coming off the runway a lot sooner too.
Yep.
So that's the one thing about your solo. Not only are you going by yourself for the first time, but it responds a little differently. So it's like getting used to that. It's all happening
Very
so fast,
differently.
but it's like,
Yep.
okay, here we go. Like
I
put,
know. I got off the ground so much quicker than I was expecting.
yeah. So that's like an immediate shock, and then you're like, okay.
Yep.
So how did it feel being up there when you realized, okay, this is my solo, I'm all by myself?
Oh, after I got off of the tow and I realized that I was by myself, it was just, I think that was the best feeling in my life, knowing that after all these years I had finally made solo in an aircraft, which had been my dream for years. All the adrenaline and just all the relief and, excitement, it all just started building up.
And I think your confidence too goes up after that.
Oh, most certainly.
You realize you can do it, you did
Hmm.
it, and you're ready for the next step.
'Cause I remember, yeah, I didn't get a lot of sleep the night before because I was worried about, every little thing that could go wrong. You know, um, what happens if I'm not, I don't get used to the new feeling without the instructor, and I get off on tow and I have to release early, or what if I mess up the pattern? And then, once I got up there and released from the tow, I'm like, this isn't any different flying with an instructor. You just don't have anyone talking to you in the back.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's even helped in my training that I would, it sounds funny, but if I started to get nervous at all, I would actually pretend that the instructor was still back there, just like being quiet and just keeping an eye on what I was doing. And, somehow that kind of like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Could hear my instructor repeating all of his little catchphrases, even though he wasn't actually there.
Right, but that's like going through your head while you're flying, and yeah, it
Hmm.
definitely helps because you start remembering everything they said. And when they release you to solo, they know that you're good and that you're going to be safe, and they know you're ready. And then
Hmm.
once you get up there, you realize I am ready. I can do this. I was taught how to do this. I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
I've got this, and that usually all kicks in, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
And you said the landing was great, one of your best landings.
Yes, if not my best landing.
Well, that's a good time to do it.
Yeah. Not that would be the worst time for me to plant it into the ground like a make a crater, because I was worried I was gonna do that, and then my instructor would be like, maybe we need to work on your landing. I got landing down very well my first year, and then my second year my progress kind of faded away, and it took me a long time to get better at the landings.
So what did you do after that solo? What did you work on? Did you get back in the glider with the instructor or a little bit of
I
both?
did not get a chance to get back in the glider, but we had a debriefing on the ground. We talked about what went well, what is there to still work on, and actually the weather conditions that day in the morning were perfect for a solo flight, but then in the afternoon some storms came in, so no one really got a chance to fly much that day.
So what are your plans now?
So I've been very busy for the past few months with school and work, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get up to Pennsylvania, which is where the nearest soaring society is to me. And I'm hoping to just continue my training there and hopefully get my private pilot's license for glider while I'm still in the area before I go off to college.
Well, that would be very cool, and I'm sure you'll have no problem with that.
Very.
And you know, the one thing about aviation, and even if something happens, you go off to college and you don't get that finished, you can always step back into it.
Always. Yep.
So it never has to be like goodbye. It just has to be, I'll be back.
I'll pick it back up in a little while. Yep.
And for some of us guys like me, you know, I stepped away for 20 some years and, you know, had a family and a lot, of course, happened in those years, but stepped back into it, and now I'm loving flying again.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's always there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any plans for your aviation future as a job,
I would really like to be an airline pilot. And you know, I've discussed this over with my parents, because actually I've got two career goals, and that's to be a music director for musical theater and to be an airline pilot, and they don't match up all that well. So what me and my parents discussed is, well, you can't get your airline transport pilot's license until you turn 23. So, you know, why not go for a degree in music, work on your pilot's license while you do that. At the college I'm planning on attending for music, there's an airport not even 2 miles from the campus where they have a flight school. And then, you know, have music as a backup plan just in case airline doesn't work out, so I can always fall back on that.
Yeah, it's always good to have a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, that's definitely a smart way of doing it. Do you have any suggestions to any other young people out there that are thinking about getting into flying, and if they are, why they should choose gliders first?
I would just say, you know, if you're having doubts about doing it, just go out and take a flight, and you really love it or it's not for you. And, you know, taking that first step is really I think the biggest way to really just, because if you find that you like it, you'll want to do it all the time. And I would say you should start with gliders because it really, you know, it gives you the fundamental, you know, stick and rudder experience, and just flying by feel, which is really helpful when you go into powered flying, because you already have the fundamentals there, and now you just need to learn how to manage a car. So it helps out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said before, the powered planes, when the engine cuts out, it's sure nice to be able to know how to fly it when that happens.
Yeah.
They're all gliders.
When the engine quits,
down.
It doesn't fall. It all turns into a glider.
That's right. Yep. Keep the airspeed up, and turns into a glider. Connor, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I greatly appreciate your time, and check back with us. I would like to hear about. Absolutely, I'd like to hear about, you know, how it's going for you in the future and how your flying is going.
Absolutely.
And there is a shortage, you know, of pilots, so
yep,
it's a great time to get into it.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Connor, and thank you for joining us for this episode and all the other episodes you have tuned into in 2019. What an awesome first year for the podcast. Wow. Since launching our first episode in January, we have heard from so many interesting and fun guest pilots. They have taken us in the cockpit with them as we soared all over the globe, from flying the ridges of the Appalachians to soaring big thermals over Utah and California and many other states. We flew over the Alps in Austria, went to the Great Heights in Australia. We rolled, flipped, turned, tumbled, and felt some serious G's as we flew with some of the best aerobatic pilots. We raced in some awesome soaring competitions all over the world with the best pilots on the planet. We joined our aviation friends this summer in the biggest aviation party on the planet, Air Venture in Oshkosh. That was a lot of fun. We have gone airborne with students as they entered the skies alone for the first time and joined the elite group of people who have soloed an aircraft. I look forward to 2020 as we continue to build this podcast and this soaring community. You guys have been awesome. Continue to listen. Continue to tell your friends at the Glider Port We will continue to bring you great soaring content, great guests, and looking forward to bringing you adventures each week here on the podcast. If you want to be better connected with us, Michelle is here to give you information on that.
On Facebook, it's Soaring the Sky Podcast. On Instagram, it's the same. If you would like to say hi, just drop Chuck a line at chuck@soaringthesky.com, or you can send us a note on the website. That's soaringthesky.com. Also, if you're a pilot, we want to hear your story. Just send us an email and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next week for another great guest and adventure on Soaring the Sky.